All right. Welcome to part two of drawing from observation. So once we have our borders all set up, let's start drawing a real life object, this key. Keys are everywhere. We use them all the time. This assignment, I want us to just do something you can easily find around the house that you think you can draw. A key seems pretty complicated, but honestly, it's already a bunch of shapes we have done together. It really is. It's just a matter of breaking it down to find the most basic, simplest shapes first. And we want to draw all of them together because these multiple shapes are kind of put together. And then once we're done with that, we will then tackle drawing it in 3D, okay? And finally, I will show us how to shade and add those important details to make our key look like a key. All right, so what we're gonna do first is I'm gonna place this key over here. Now it might move around during this assignment, but I'm always gonna put it back in the same position that I can see from the angle in which I am looking at it, okay? Now, when I'm going to draw, I'm going to try to find the most biggest shapes I can see first that are easiest for me to draw. Right off the bat, I see that this part looks like a nice big rectangle, okay? Nice big rectangle. It's almost a square, but it's more of a rectangle. And I can draw a big rectangle, so I'm going to very lightly draw one. Now, it's super important that we draw very lightly right now because we want to make sure that we are able to erase our mistakes and are able to make corrections later on. Okay, so I'm going to draw my rectangle here first. So to do this, I will be rotating my paper a lot. I'm going to scoot this off to the side for now. All right. I rotate my paper a lot because my hand wants to move in this direction. If I plant my hand on the table, it's just going to move in this arc. And sometimes you might have already noticed you do that when you draw. I try to draw by lifting my hand up and drawing from my elbow, even my shoulder. It gives me much more control and a larger range of motion. Obviously, I don't need to go crazy, but I want to be able to have all that range of motion because it'll help me draw straight lines. You can't draw a straight line going like this. This is a natural curve. You can't draw straight just by resting your hand on the table. You have to let it slide around at least, okay? So I'm going to draw that rectangle. Now notice when I draw, I drag my hand away from myself, okay? Because when I draw towards myself, I get this T-Rex hand situation going on. I don't want that. Also puts more pressure on my pencil, and it's harder to draw. Notice how lately I'm drawing. I'm just feeling it out on my paper. Just sketching it out. The idea is I'm trying not to have too much empty space on my paper right now, okay? And even though I'm drawing this at a diagonal, it's still going to take up most of this area I mapped out. Okay, that looks like a good, solid rectangle for now. I plan on touching it up later. All right, great. Let's look at our key again. I noticed this big, long section with all these crazy details, but you know what? I'm going to split it up into smaller shapes for me. And the biggest part I can see is a big, long rectangle. I see a little bit of a triangle in the front. I see these kind of two rectangles sticking off of the bottom of it. I'm not even going to tackle this junk yet. No way. I'll get there, though. So I'm going to draw a nice, big, long rectangle that looks proportionate to this top part. Proportion means how big something is compared to another thing. So since this part looks like it's longer than this part, I need to draw it like that on here. And I also notice it kind of comes in almost a quarter of the way in on either side. So I can start in by going a quarter way in over here and over here, just eyeballing it, and then just draw a nice big long rectangle. I'm going to rotate my paper a little bit so I can draw a little bit better. It's important to not just draw your paper at one angle. Even if you rotate to draw a little bit, it's always good to kind of rotate it back. And even right away, I'm noticing it's already kind of slanting a little too much. So let me bring it back a bit. There we go. That's looking better. Erase those mistakes. Once I draw the correct part I want, great. Looks good so far. All right, here we go. Doesn't look like a key yet, but I'm still working on it. All right, but I have the two biggest parts out of the way. I'm going to maybe fix this just a little bit. Notice I kind of keep going back to areas I already worked. Just to kind of, I'm always evaluating my work and seeing what needs to be worked on. I'm never just done with one shape and then I move on. I always go back no matter what. That's part of the art making process. You always need to work on old areas after you've done new areas just to see if you need to make it work. Okay, cool. Here we go. I'm going to add that little triangle part right there. It kind of comes down. It actually sort of looks like it will cut in just a little bit, and that'll help me set up my next part. Awesome. And now I'm going to erase that part right there because I don't need it anymore. So notice I'm already subtracting parts from the shape because I don't need to keep them. I'm going to add this rectangle up here. I'm going to add this one down here. I notice that this one goes a little bit further up than this one, so I'm going to draw this going up a little bit further than that one. Just a little bit. Cool. Very cool. All right. Before I go further with this, I'm going to tackle this part. Now, I see a trapezoid hole in here, but it looks like I could also add a trapezoid to the outside of my rectangle. All right. Because I see that this loops around, and then there's a hole. Okay. So I'm going to add a trapezoid up here. And it looks like my trapezoid basically lines up with the rectangles on either side of my key. So I know to start drawing this in this kind of area because it lines up with my key, and I know to start drawing this side on this side, or this part of the trapezoid on this side because it lines up with this part of my key. I'll fix that real quick. All right, cool. So I'm going to drag my hand and see where I should start. Drag my hand where I should see where I should start. I'm literally mapping out where I should be drawing on my key, and that's very good. Ooh, let me rotate. Sorry, folks. I don't want to go too far up my key. Make this look a little more dimensional or more solid. Okay, cool. So now I got my top part of my key. So let me rotate back a little bit. All right. So this line represents this outside part of my key, okay? Now I have to draw the inside of trapezoid that is inside of here. All right, and I need to try and make that hole as proportionate as possible to the overall shape that I have right here. So I need to make this look, scale it up to look like it should be just like how it is in here. That part's a little tricky. So I notice that it goes in past where my square would be inside of my overall key contour shape. Cool. Do, 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 do. Boop, boop, boop. All right, that's looking good. Let me kind of fix it a little bit. It's a little wonky angle. That's okay. Ooh, maybe that hole's a little too big. Actually, no, it looks all right. It looks like it's to scale. Okay. Now, I noticed that these corners are kind of sharp, whereas the key actually has rounder corners. I'm going to do that later. I'm going to finally tackle the junk in here because this looks kind of complicated. Okay. Let's literally break this down into its shapes. There's a long groove right here. And you know what? For that, I'm just going to use a rectangle. Even though it looks like it kind of tapers to a point, or almost a point, I just have to keep that in mind. So I'm going to draw the rectangle first, and then I'll kind of do that extra part after. And I notice that's very close to the top of my key. So let me kind of clean up this line right here so I can draw as close as possible to what I see in the key. All right, now that my area is set up, let's party. All right, and it even looks like at this point, it should start tapering. So have it kind of start tapering to around there. I'm not happy with that. Let me go back and fix that. So it actually starts tapering actually before this rectangle. So let me do that. Very gradual taper. Very gradual taper. And then it should just kind of end right there. So I'm going to go back and touch it up. Ooh, it's starting to get messy. Got to do some erasing. There we go. We're getting there. Now, I have this whole crazy spot. All of this, these are the teeth of the key. All right, and I'm going to map that out, and then in the next video, I'll show you how to break this part down, because it's a little complicated. All right, so underneath here, I'm going to just draw this kind of line where the teeth would be. So I'm breaking up my whole area, and I'm setting it up to draw smaller, more complicated areas. So it's good for us to compartmentalize those more complicated parts that we might have difficulty facing later. I'm going to go down to here, so that represents this line and that line. So this line and that line. Cool. And before I go any further, let me do some touch-up. I noticed the end of the key is not pointy like I drew here, so I'm going to blunt it a bit. And then I will erase these inside lines because I don't need them anymore. All right, looks good. Now I think we're starting to get something that looks close to the key already, which I'm pretty excited about. All right, so in the next video, we are going to break down this part, okay? Stay tuned.